I'm going to talk about my life story. Starting with, I was born in Poland and in 1928, and in 1939 life went on, everything was okay, and in 1939 September the Germans have attacked Poland and the war started. And our school was closed then, and that was the end of my schooling. I was caught on several times to unload wagons of coal for the German army, and then one night they came for my father. They took my father away, and they were supposed to have sent him to a camp, a work camp. It was during the night they came for him, and they took him with, and he escaped. And then the German policeman came back and shouted at my mother, "Where's your husband?" and so on. And he looked at my brother, who was 14 years old, and he took my brother. And after about half an hour, he came back absolutely raging. "Where's your husband and where's your son?" She said he took him with, and I haven't seen them since. And then he looked at me, and I was 11 years old, and then at that time they still took you to a doctor to see if you're fit for work, and he says, "You come with me." And I went, and the doctor sent me home, but somebody from the committee said his father escaped, his brother escaped, somebody's got to go from the family. Very nice household. I had 3 sisters and a brother, and my sister worked for my uncle in a textile factory in Pabianic, and my eldest one, and then I had another sister, she was 16, and I had a brother who was 14, and then came me, and then had a smaller sister. And the family was quite a happy family, and my father was making officers' boots because there was an army stationed in our town, and he had 3 people working for him, and life went on. I had a very good childhood. Wintertime I used to go on sleighs, and I went down the hill, and it was a wonderful time. And I also went ice skating on the river because it was minus 25 degrees, and it was very thick ice, so we used to skate on the river. And so I had a decent childhood. Went to school, and then in 1939, suddenly the Germans have attacked Poland, and all the people from the town had to leave because the Polish army was making a stand on the other side of the river Vistula, which passed through our town. And we went to lodge. We had some relatives there, and we eventually stayed with them for a few days, and the Germans came in. The German army, in the beginning, they didn't do very much, and they were just in lodge. When we got to lodge, I've noticed I've caught a few Jews, religious Jews with beards, and they cut their beards off, and they were laughing and making jokes, and I thought that was wrong. And then the following day, tanks came in with Germans and motorized. Poland had nothing like that. Poland had a lot of horses. The army was on horses and swords, that's all they went into a war. Didn't have very much weapons and so on. And that's why they were overrun quite quickly by the Germans. And then the second, third day I watched them, the German army coming in with tanks and armored vehicles and so on. And they were marching on Warsaw, on the capital of Poland. And after 4 days, my father said to my mother, I think we'll go home now. And we are about 60 kilometers away from Lodz. He said, we'll go home and start life again.
Right, okay.
And they came back and they started life again. And in the beginning it was okay, they didn't do anything, but they caught people in the street. Even I was caught because our school was closed then in September. And I was caught to unload wagons of coal about 3 times, and it was okay. I didn't have what to do. So then they set up a Jewish committee. The Jewish people set up a committee, and they supplied workers for the Germans. Ours was also an army garrison town, and they used to catch people first, and then they were supplied with people through the committee. And every day they used to send off people to work for the Germans. And then one night they came and took my father, and they were sending him into a camp. And they took him during the night, and the policeman came, and he escaped. Then the policeman came back and shouted, where's your husband? My mother said, you took him with, and I haven't seen him. He looked at my brother, who was 14. He said, you come with us if your father escaped. So my brother went, and he escaped. Then our door was kicked in again, and shouting at my mother and so on. And he looked at me, but I was 11 years old, so I knew I wouldn't be taken. But yes, at that time they still used a doctor, and they took me to the doctor, and the doctor sent me home. And somebody from the committee says his father escaped, his brother escaped, somebody's got to go up in the family. And I was the one. They marched us to the railway station, and my brother came with a suitcase to exchange me, and I wouldn't have it, and I was crying, and I said, no, I will go, and eventually he allowed me to go, and we went onto a train, and then it took a few hours, and we got to the destination, to a place called Otoczno, near Poznań. And then when we got to the railway station there, we were unloaded, and there were 2 SS men just saying, you leave all your stuff here, all the suitcases on the ground, and they should will bring the stuff for you into your place and into the camp, and they marched us off to the camp. Once we got to the gates, they started beating us with whips and sticks, and eventually we did get into the camp, and there was about 2,500 men there working on the railway line for the attack already in Russia. That was in 1940. And it took 18 months to build that railway line, and eventually they when it was built, there were beatings and hangings, and people were beaten with spades, and very, very barbaric. And out of 2,500 men, within 18 months, there was only 11 people left alive, and I was one of them. 9 were sent to another camp, and me and another boy was sent home. Because I worked for the camp commander, used to clean his office and his house. He had pity on me or something. He did send me home. Nobody ever came home from a camp, but he did send me home. And when I got home, women came in asking me, how was my husband, how was my son? I said, everybody's working, everybody's okay. I didn't tell them the truth. I never even told my mother the truth, actually, what happened there.
So, did you ever see your father?
No, my father was caught and taken to another camp.
Right.
To this day, I don't know where he was, but he never survived.
And what about your brother?
And he was also, when I got home in 1942, and they all the ghetto is being liquidated. All the Jews are being liquidated. They marched us off to a church, to a Catholic church, and it was not a very big church. Eventually there were 4,000 people without water, without food or toilet facilities. There was nothing. And the nuns ran the church, and they didn't know what to do, and they were trying to help, but there was nothing they could do about it. The SS, the Germans wouldn't allow them to do anything, and what happened actually, eventually they told us to get out from the church, and they asked you, what's your profession? And I told him I was a tailor, and he told me to carry on. And eventually all the people went back in the church, and I asked my mother to give me a utensil to try and get some water at the gate. And as I approached the gate, an SS officer shouted at me, what's your profession? I told him I was a Schneider, a tailor, and he told me to go out and join the 150 people which were picked for work. And that's the last time I've ever seen my family. And we marched off, and we were taken to Lodz Ghetto. Lodz was a very large ghetto, had 160,000 people, surrounded by barbed wire, guarded by SS men and police with guns. Every so often they used to shoot a few people, it didn't matter to them whatsoever. And we worked for the German war effort, making uniforms, hats, boots, and also everything for the army. And every second day they used to take out with lorries, they used to take out the stuff what we were made for them. And eventually I got into an orphanage because I was on my own, and I was there with 180 children. We went out to work every day, and then I was there for about 18 months in the orphanage. I was working in a textile factory, and on the machinery there. I've learned all the things while I was there. And lunchtime we got some soup, with some very watery soup, and that was basically our daily food. And also we got some rations, but very, very little. And starvation was terrible. And people were dying in the street, children were dying. It was the most horrendous situation. And every so often they used to shoot a few people for no reason, the guards. And I was there for about 2 years altogether in the Lodge Ghetto.
How old were you when you got to the Lodge Ghetto? What? Because you were 11 years old when it first happened. So when you got to the Lodge Ghetto,
I was 13.
13. Okay.
Yes. And so we, as I said, we worked and every day and very little rations, food, and we're starving very much. And I've even seen 10 people being hanged. We had to watch it. And then, after that, in 1944, the Germans said we're liquidating the ghetto because the Russian army were already in Warsaw at that time, and they were moving forward. And the Germans didn't tell us the truth. They said, we're sending you to another camp. And they even took some machinery with them on the wagons, and they loaded us 100 people to a wagon. We had to stand up to a goods wagon, and we had a bucket and a cover just to cover the toilet, because there was nothing, because we were women and men together, and we couldn't even sit down. It was so cramped. And they took us on a train for 2 days, and I looked through the crack of the train, and I've noticed assessment with dogs. That got me worried very quickly. We've arrived in Auschwitz concentration camp, and then they started, they said men and boys on one queue, women and children on the other queue, and to move forward. And as we moved forward, there were 3 high-ranking SS officers, and they asked you, they looked at you if you fit enough and so on. If you weren't, if you were a bit older or too young, they send you to the left side, men and women together. And to the right, I've noticed they pick some fit people. And I watched that, and when I came up to the 3 officers, he asked me how old I am. I said I was 17. I was only 14. What's your profession? I'm a locksmith. I didn't even know how to hold a screwdriver or anything like that. Anyway, I've just told him, and he sent me to the right. I came with 185 children. Only 2 of us got out to the right with the working people. And all the other 183 went to their death in a gas chamber. And all the other people from the transport. And we walked on, and in Auschwitz, and the men with striped suits said, you're on the right side. But we didn't know right side, wrong side, we didn't know where we are. And then we got to a brick building, and then we got in there, and they told us to take off our clothing. And I had some photographs of my family, 6 photographs, and that I had to put it down on the floor. That's the last time I've ever seen what my family looked like. And from that room, we went into the next room. They shaved our heads off, and then we went for a shower. The first shower in 6 months I had. We didn't wash in Auschwitz. And from there, we were dried, and then we went in the next room, and we got the striped suit, and I also got my number on my arm. Auschwitz was the only camp that gave you a number on the arm. And that day, you lost your name. You didn't have a name anymore. anytime they wanted you, they called you by the number. B7608. That was my number and that was my name. Yes, so we're taken into the next room. They shaved our head and then they gave us a shower. The first shower in 6 months. And then after that we went to the next room and we got our uniform and they gave us the number B7608. And from that moment onwards, I didn't have a name anymore. All they called me was by my number. And I also had the same number on my jacket here and also on my trousers. So anytime they wanted me, they called me by my number. And after that, we were taken to the gypsy camp. The gypsies, 2 days earlier, they were taken out. They were given a loaf of bread, all of them. And then they were taken to the gas chamber. They gassed them and then they burned the bodies, all the gypsies. And we took their barracks and wooden barrack. We were 1,000 men in a barrack. Three tiers, all the way down, 500 on one side and 500 on the other side. And we slept 10 men. No straw, no mattress, nothing. We just slept on wooden planks. And for a cushion, we used to wind our clothes up and put it on our head. And that's how we slept. And 5 o'clock in the morning, they used to wake us up, took us to the toilet, which was 40 holes in a concrete plug. And then after that, we just put our hands in. There was a few tanks, or we dipped our hands in them, in the water. We washed our eyes. That's all we could do. We couldn't even have a shower or a bath or anything. And then we went back into the barracks. Some people had enough. They just went up to the wires, touched it, and got electrocuted. And the assessment allowed them to do that. So they were lying outside the wires. And after that, we went out to a quarry, a stone quarry, and I worked there every day for about 2 months. And then from then onwards, we were chosen to work on the agriculture. Ours was 30 kilometers big. It was a tremendous large camp. And so I got 2 horses to work to turn the soil over. And for fertilizers, they used to bring us sacks of ashes from the crematorium. When I just threw it down, I could feel it in my hand, the bones. And after that, for about 3 months, I worked on agriculture. Then they changed me to work on the fishing commando, to catch fish in the river Vistula, which passed Auschwitz. And we used to sort them out live, and then we used to transport them onto tankers on the railway. And we used to send them off to Germany. And then after that, for a while, I worked about 3 months on the agriculture thing. And then after that, the fishing commando. And after working the fishing commando a few months, the winter came in, and it was minus 23 degrees, heavy snow, and conditions were absolutely horrendous. We were in a striped pyjama, and also we had a hat. And when they used to count us, sometimes an hour, sometimes 2 hours, we had to stand in the cold, minus 23 degrees, snow, and no coats. And then they used to tell us to go in. After they counted, if it was okay, it was all right. Otherwise, people died when they were counting them. The people just collapsed and died. And they counted in. Everything had to check. And the end of January 1945, suddenly we had artillery firing from a distance. The Russian army was near Auschwitz, and they took us out on the death march. Why the death march? We walked in columns, no coats, in striped suits, and we walked, and anybody which couldn't walk, they shot in the back of the head. There was a unit of assessment, and they shot them in the back of the head, and they threw the body on the side of the road. And all the road was packed with bodies. And after 2 days walking, we came to a town. They loaded us onto on good trucks, and they took us on a journey for 3 days. We arrived in Germany, eastern Germany, in a place called Buchenwald, and then we got the first shower in 6 months, and they gave us different clothing, and they put us eventually into a barrack with Russian prisoners of war. The Russians were not on the Geneva Convention, so they treated them as ordinary prisoners, the Russian army. And I was there with the Russian army for 4 days, and then somebody came and took all the young people out, and they took us to Block 66. We didn't get any more food, but at least one thing in Buchenwald we young people did not work. The workers had a say with the guards that we shouldn't work, and somehow it worked. And I was there till April the 7th, 1945. We could hear the American army tanks firing from a distance. They were near Buchenwald, and then the Germans called out all these barracks to come outside, and they marched us off to Weimar, 8 kilometers away, and they took us to the railway station and loaded us onto open wagons. That was April, and sometimes we got snow during the night, and they took us on a journey for a whole month on open wagons. Rain, snow, all sorts of different things. And very rarely they gave us any food. We ate grass, we boiled grass, and we ate it. I've seen cannibalism. Every day people were dying, every day. They had 3 wagons for the dead bodies. We used to bury them when we arrived in villages. They'd stop the train and we buried the dead bodies. We started with 3,000 men. Only about 600 arrived in Czechoslovakia on the 4th of May 1945. Our train was taken into Theresienstadt. That was a ghetto for German Jews and Czech Jews. We were liberated by the Russian army on the 8th of May 1945, and I did survive. There was typhoid in Theresienstadt, terrible typhoid and all sorts of diseases from the prisoners what they came. Because on the journey, the Germans, from time to time, they cooked us some soup, and they made it so salty that you couldn't even eat it. So you took one spoonful and it was too salty, and it was every day people were dying like flies. And we had 3 wagons for the dead bodies. And then after the liberation, many people had typhoid. The hospitals were packed with people, even on the floor. They slept on the floor. The Russian army, they couldn't help us anymore. They did everything they could. And they started bringing us rice pudding. So we had for everyday rice pudding, because our stomachs wasn't used to any food. People were dying even after the war in Theresienstadt. And we were there till August 1945, about 3 months. And the British consul came, looked us over. We stayed in 3 buildings, the children, and he looked us over. Those which were fit were separated, and those which weren't had illnesses. They went to a sanatorium, but eventually they came to Britain. And on the 14th of August 1945, we were taken to Prague, the capital of Czechoslovakia, and from there we were taken to the airport. And at the airport there were 10 Lancaster bombers and 30 children to a bomber, British aeroplanes, bombers, during the war. And we were loaded 30 children to a bomber, sat on the floor, 15 on one side and 15 on the other. And after 8 hours, we've arrived in Britain, in the Lake District, Carlisle. The planes landed, and then we were taken by bus to just outside Windermere, where they were making aeroplanes during the war, and the war was finished. And we took their houses. All the people went back home, the workers, and we took their houses. And we were there for 6 months, recuperating. And after that, we were distributed. 20 children went to Liverpool. I went to Liverpool with 20 children. Manchester took 30, London took 120, Glasgow took some children, and that's how we came to England after the war in 1945, the 14th of May 1945, 14th of August, by the way. And we had 7 hours of English lessons. That's all we had. No English lessons, and we made words up and so on, and that's how we eventually, slowly, we lived in hostels, and then we lived in lodgings with people and so on, and that is how I came to England and so on. But I've lost 80 people from my family, cousins, uncles, everybody during the war, and that is basically my life. And I go around today, talk to universities and schools, and talk in Holocaust Museum, and this is my life. And I go on March of the Living every year, and hoping that I'm here for much longer, and hoping that life goes on well, and that's all I can say.
It's a tremendous story. Just going back to when you actually saw the first dead body at that young age, what feelings was running through you at that time? Because, like I said, it's hard for somebody so young
to see
things like that. Yeah. It's traumatic.
Very.
How did you feel at that when you saw your first? Can you remember the first time you saw
yes,
a dead body?
Dead bodies?
Just explain that,
please. I've seen people being hanged in lodge as well, and I've also seen people being shot It was dreadful to watch that happening. Horrible, especially for a very young child like me. But after a while, you get used to this sort of situation. And I've seen people being shot and hanged, and also when I worked in Auschwitz on the agriculture, they used to bring fertilizer in sacks, and when I threw it on the floor, bones in my hand from the crematorium, and we had to do it. Had no option.
At that point, did you think, you know, my days are numbered on earth? Did you think you would be next? I mean, how did you, where was your mind at that point? Where did you place your mind to survive that situation that you were coming here?
I lived from day to day. I never thought of the future, because there was no future as far as that's concerned. People dying, people hanged, people, we had to watch all sorts of different things. Every second, third day, something else happened. And then transport came with trains from Greece, from Italy, from Poland to Auschwitz every day. And most of the people went to their death into the gas chambers. No problem at all. And we knew about it. We could see the chimneys, 4 chimneys, pulling out smoke from the chimneys every day. And we lived with it. We had no option.
So you just obviously just become used to the environment.
Immune. I became immune to all that.
To everything.
Oh, everything, yes. Even hanging people I used to watch. In the beginning I used to look away, and then I got used to it, and it was a normal thing to me.
Were you a religious man back then? Were you religious?
Religious?
Yeah.
Well, I learned to my religion, and I prayed, but couldn't have any religion in the camps. You couldn't. It was an impossibility. There was no conditions for any prayers or anything like that.
So when you did leave the camp, what was running through your mind at that point when you came to the UK, when you escaped, and obviously you left family and friends back there who died? What was going through your mind at that point did you think to yourself, this is it, I'm free?
Yes, I knew I was free, but we got eventually, a person came from the Red Cross. We gave him the names of the things, and came back a few months later, and she says, we're afraid that nobody from your family survived. I found my sister through the Red Cross. She escaped to Russia, and she went to Siberia and so on. My elder sister, she did survive. She was married, and she had one little girl, and I found her after the war. I went to see her, and then eventually she went to America, and she had 2 little girls, and I went over to see her eventually, and she died about 20 years ago, and also her husband died as well, and she got her 2 daughters that are still alive. The only person from the family then we had 80 people in the family, cousins, uncles, everybody. Everybody was killed. We went 20 children to Liverpool from Windermere. We were there for about 8 months in a hostel, and we had about, I would say about between 3 and 4 hours of English lessons. That's all. And I had to go to libraries and made words up, and that's how I learned English. And then after that, after 8 months, we were taken to Manchester. We joined up the other boys in Manchester, 30 boys. We lived in a hostel for many, many months. And then we went to live with families.
Foster parents. Yeah.
Yeah. Lodgings. Not very good.
Why wasn't it very good?
No, it wasn't the right thing for us. We went to live with families. If they had room, yes. If they didn't, after the war, things weren't as good as it is now. People who came back from the army and people weren't adjusted. It was rationed. Eggs were rationed. Other things were rationed. And it was a very hard life. But eventually, it sorted itself out eventually. But it was a struggle all the time. As I said, after the war, Britain went through as well, and so it wasn't easy for anybody. And it wasn't easy for other people, so we basically suffered a little bit as well. And eventually we adjusted to life, and I got married, and I've got 3 children, and I've got 7 grandchildren, and life goes on. And
can you remember your first job in the UK?
Yes.
Right. What were you doing? What was your profession?
Electrician.
How did you get involved as an electrician?
Because each one of us could, whatever we wanted to do, we said to the teacher and so on. And they tried everything possible. We had to go to labour exchange. I got a job as an electrician. And I've worked rewiring factories and all sorts of different things. Slowly I've learned different things, and then I went to work as a car electrician, repairing dynamo starters. In those days, things used to be dynamo starters and all sorts of different rewiring cars. And that was my first jobs. And then afterwards, I worked in a textile mill and mechanic afterwards, and life went on, and eventually I finished off with renting out houses to students, and that I finished with, and I've sold them, and that was it. And that was my life up to now.
Right. How did you meet your wife?
Pardon?
How did you meet your wife?
Through a dance.
Right.
I went to a dance, and I met her actually in Leeds. And I'm very happy with her, and everything goes on, and we live a normal life, and I give a lot of talks, and Bet Shalom and Holocaust Museum and schools, universities and so on, and I never stop. Sometimes I have 3 talks a week. Yeah, but I do it. And hoping that everything goes right, and this is basically my life.
Right. In terms of the kids of today, you've got kids of yourself. What advice did you give your kids growing up? Based on how they should look at life, because like I said, I've got a son, and I think kids today take life for granted.
Yes, because they got more things today than we had. It's a different situation altogether. They've got good schooling, they've got university, they can go to university if they're clever enough. They've got chances, which we didn't have. And hoping that they grow up good people and good citizens, and that's basically what I hope everybody will come out with. And that's the only thing I talk to them about and give them my advice and so on, and they've got more chances than we had in the old days. We didn't have any chance at all. There was no university for us or nothing, and it's just a job.
And lastly, obviously going through that, did you have any post-traumatic stress disorder at all? Did
Yes.
you have anything like that at all?
I had 30 years. I used to wake up, I was scared, I dreamt a lot, but now it's left me. For about 30 years I used to have nightmares and so on, and because you couldn't get through what I went through without coming off any different. And thank goodness it left me now. So as far as that's concerned, I'm okay.
Brilliant. And do you have anything else to add at all?
Yes,
Listeners?
and I go to the March of the Living, and I also go with other groups as well to Poland. I go about 5-6 times a year, and I take school children with. I used to take a lot of children from Liverpool, 50, 60 children at a time, to Auschwitz, and show them the camp, and used to give them talks. We went for a few days, and went to Poland with many groups. I went, and as long as I can do it, I'll do it and just carry on. Yes, we were invited to meet the Queen, and about 7 of us. And we went to the palace and we met the Queen, and we had something to eat. And then I got my MBE, and I was called to the palace, and where also people got the knighthood and all sorts of different things, and we were taught what to do when we go into the room, and I got it from Charles, the MBE, and when I came up to him, he asked me questions about the Holocaust and so on, and had a little chat with him, and then I went to the next room and I got my MBE as well, and actually I got it from him, and then I went to the room and they put it into a case and everything went off okay, and we had many photographs taken and had a very good day. I had my daughter there and my granddaughter with, and had a wonderful day in the palace.
What was going through your mind when you received that information saying that you're going to meet the Queen and receive an MBE? How did you feel?
I felt wonderful. It was something which I never expected in my life, to meet these people or to get anything, any rewards and so on. And it was a wonderful day for me when I did get the MBE. And I do my best to try and do everything I can for human beings, and I help wherever I can, and hope life goes on. And I hope I have a happy retirement, and that's all I'm praying, that my children should be all right, and my grandchildren, and that's all I basically hope, that everything went okay. My name is Arek Hersh. I was born 1928 in Poland, and I was born on the 13th of the 9th, 1928. So I'm actually 89. I know I don't look it, but the years are there. And yes, I will go on as long as I can, and do whatever I can to help my fellow human beings. And thank you very much. This is my story, and this is also our story.